5 minutes has gone by, so hopefully everybody's raise your hand if you're not back. And that was obviously a joke. We're going to go ahead and proceed with the talk part of this. So just by way of background, this particular talk, this meeting is a joint meeting for those who weren't here in the first hour between NOVAC and CAS, two different astronomy clubs in Virginia. Originally had scheduled this for Charlottesville Astronomical Society and had discussed it enough in the Discord group with NOVAC that it seemed that there was interest in this subject there as well. So Juan had asked me if I would do this again for NOVAC, and I said no. We're going to do this, suggested we do this as a joint meeting, and so that's exactly what we're doing here. So we have members from both CAS and NOVAC here. And this is being recorded, so this will be posted on the CAS YouTube channel in a few days. And if Juan wants the recording, I'm sure he'll figure out how to post it into the NOVAC group as well, but it will be on YouTube. So the subject of this talk came about, it's two things really kind of rolled into one. The first is narrowband processing. And then the second part of this is doing that in free software, Affinity in particular. And so it's a little bit of two things rolled together. The Charlottesville Astronomical Society Imaging Group has been around for only about a year. And we started it up about a year ago because it turns out we have an influx of people who are really just getting started in imaging, and another group of people that are maybe, have done it for a few years and so on. But we've kind of taken the tack at CAS of doing things at sort of a tutorial level. So the narrowband part of this talk, if you're an old hand, this might be old stuff to you. But for the CAS group, hopefully this will be helpful and get people going and understanding. The second part of this is Affinity, which is, there's always an interest in free software. Affinity is a lot like Photoshop in a lot of ways, using layer-based approaches to processing. I had an interest earlier this year in trying to kind of move away from PixInsight for the nonlinear part of my processing workflow because it's a lot of color mixing and management. And when you do that in PixInsight, it's doing it in a destructive way and it's kind of hard to unwind. You can do it, but it wasn't as clean as I wanted it to be. So I had an interest in trying to figure out how to do non-destructive editing. And I had played around with Photoshop for a lot, and Photoshop is fantastic, costs 20 bucks a month. So, is there an alternative? And that's when I started playing around with Affinity, which is totally free, and found it pretty much, fills all of my needs for doing that nonlinear part of my processing workflow. So let me wind back a little bit to the data that we're going to work with today. If you had the meeting invite, you had a link to data that's out there that I'm going to be demonstrating. It's nonlinear data, and I'll be showing how that kind of comes together.
Hey, Jeff, I think
Yeah.
your screen might be stuck. You might need to refresh your share screen.
Uh-oh. Are you seeing?
I'm seeing my screen.
Uh-oh.
Or maybe
Really?
that's me.
Oh, I took over sharing, and it might. How about everybody else? Are you seeing my screen or Margarita's?
I, I think I'm seeing your screen, Jeff.
Okay.
Okay, might just be me. I'll be right back.
All right. I'll continue. So let me kind of just do a quick overview then of some of the things. I did not prepare slides because I really wanted this to be a demo, but I do want to point people to the resources that we had posted out there. One of them was the link to the data, and if you pulled that down, you saw that I included data in two forms. One was linear, just stacked masters, and the other was nonlinear. I had already done the linear processing in PixInsight, gradient removal, deconvolution, and just a basic stretch in SETI Astro statistical stretch. of the different channels. And I also did the star processing and separated the stars. So the nonlinear files are stretched files. And we're going to start from that today, but I included the linear stuff just in case you want to go back and, kind of start from a original starting point and see if you can, kind of reproduce everything that we're going to see here today. So Affinity is, as I was saying, it's a free alternative to Photoshop. It used to cost $60 in its version 2 um, for a license, but with its latest incarnation, Affinity was bought out by Canva, who wants to sell AI tools. And so they're kind of, you see it here, Affinity by Canva. And so Canva decided to make Affinity free as sort of the gateway drug to kind of seduce you in and get you to buy a subscription to their AI stuff. Good news is for astrophotographers, you really don't need any of their AI tools at all. So you can just use Affinity 100% for free and get layers-based, non-destructive processing that's really quite powerful. Even better is, I'm going to show you in the next tab here, that James Ritson, who is an employee actually of Canva. He is one of the Affinity developers, is also an astrophotographer. And so he put together a set of macros that you can download for free. Just type in 0 here and the name of fair price. Say, I want this, and you can download and install those macros directly into Affinity. And now you have a pretty powerful astrophotography workflow available to you, or set of tools available to you. And a lot of these are very, very similar to the sorts of things that you would find in PixInsight, the sorts of scripts you'll find there, like dark structure enhance and various sharpening tools and so on. These macros kind of do just about the same thing. And I'm going to demonstrate those for you. So download Affinity, download the macros and install them, and now you have a powerful layer-based processing environment. And so the last thing I'm going to show you is, if I've been speaking Greek and you don't know what layers-based processing really means, there's a web page out there that you can search on the Affinity website and their help thing that talks about layers and blending modes. So if you're familiar, this is all old hat, and if you're not, basically what layers does is I can have stack up independent images and adjustment layers and tweak all of them independently, and then set the blending mode, and that determines what the effect is. And there's multiple blending modes available, whether you're using Photoshop or Affinity. They're very, very similar. And the blending mode you choose is generally, has an effect. So for example, there's little examples here. If you use pigment blend mode, it blends the different colors, and if you don't, it's just kind of overlaying things. These blending modes tend to come in different flavors or categories of things. There are blending modes that will darken the particular things that you're blending together. Multiply is another darkening, but has a slightly different effect. And so on. And then there's lightning modes. One that astrophotographers should be mostly familiar with is called screen. When we go starless and then we blend our stars back in, usually we're using screen blending mode to do that. But that is it's not just for stars, it turns out. You can blend just about anything together with screen blending mode. I'm not going to go through all of these, but there's a web page out there that kind of helps you to understand what all these blending modes are. The last thing I'm going to discuss before getting into the demo itself is, especially for the newbies to narrowband image processing, especially our CAS group. If you recall, earlier this year, I did another talk on galaxy image processing during galaxy season. And my emphasis there was that natural color is better. Try to stay true to natural color. Don't get crazy. Try to make galaxies look like galaxies. If you're doing broadband imaging, true color or something close to it is best. Maybe you're moving the saturation knobs around a little bit, or bumping this a little bit here or there. but don't change red to blue and yellow to green or whatever, right? You stay true to the natural color. With narrowband imaging, all bets are off. Narrowband imaging, you have the opportunity to do whatever you want. In fact, almost all of your narrowband images are going to be false color. We're doing color mapping in some way, but there are some standard ways of doing it. This web page is from Trevor. What's his name? Trevor.
Trevor Jones.
Trevor Jones, the Astro Backyard guy. Yeah, so he has a nice web page on narrowband imaging. And typically when we're doing that, we're collecting S2, just like the images we were just reviewing in the last hour, we're collecting things like S2, which is, on the far end of the red spectrum, hydrogen alpha, a little less red, but still red, and O3, which is right on the dividing line between the blue and the green parts of the spectrum. This green here is probably not too accurate. It's more teal, perhaps would be O3. And so when we collect those or we measure those, though, they're not mapping naturally to red, green, blue channels. We're doing color mapping. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. Let me see, is there a... yeah, here it is. So when we're talking about the Hubble palette, everybody's familiar with the Hubble Pillars of Creation image, which is kind of the quintessential Hubble palette image out there that everybody knows and loves. What the Hubble folks did, and it has become known as the Hubble palette, is you map S2 to red, which it really is red, to the red channel. You map O3 to the blue channel, which is kind of blue, but not fully blue. And then you map hydrogen alpha to green, which it ain't green, right? It's actually kind of red. And if you do that, quite often what we find is that hydrogen alpha is the strongest channel by far. And so if we naively blend things together, I get a very green image, and now I'm fighting, how to tame that green and turn it into something else so I get something that looks good. An alternative palette that's also very popular is sometimes we don't collect S2 data or we want to use it differently. It's the HOO palette, meaning I'm going to map hydrogen alpha to red, better, it actually is red, and then O3 to blue and O3 to green, which makes sense because O3 is kind of at that dividing line between blue and green. So HOO palettes tend to look a little bit more natural or correct, I guess you would say, than SHO. But in all cases, hydrogen alpha almost always dominates. If you just take hydrogen alpha, in its native state in oxygen 3, and you blend these together linearly, what you find is it still comes out very, very red. Hydrogen alpha is going to be the thing that dominates that image. So what people normally do with narrowband images is if we want to use a Hubble-ish palette or an HOO palette or one of the many flavors out there, you'll hear about something called 4-ax and then hate it. Or any of these other things. We do these things because we're trying to highlight different aspects, of the image. We're trying to see, the contrast and structure of these neat narrowband nebula, and be able to see it in a pleasing way, right? So with that as the background, first, the rules don't apply that of natural color don't necessarily apply. That said, we don't usually go too crazy, but you're allowed to. It's your data. You can do anything with it that you want. So with that, let me just pause real quick, see if there's any questions. Feel free to interrupt, by the way, and I'm going to go ahead and start going into the demo part of Affinity. But let me pause for questions. Okay, no questions so far, so that's good. It all made sense. So this is Affinity. Let me move that over there. So Affinity is very similar to Photoshop. It's of course going to look different. But what you have is a general workspace here with a layers panel here and the independent channels and brushes and history and whatnot. You have various layer controls. You have adjustment and tools here on the left. And what we also see here is this panel with all of these macros I was just talking about. So so Affinity comes with some natural, or some macros built in, and I'll show you that we need to use those in this case for what we're going to do. But then because I also installed the JR astrophotography macros, they're all here as well and available to us. Before I get too far into the Affinity thing, I'm just going to show you that when you download, there it is, when you download the JR macros, go away AI assistant. When you download the JR macros, it does come with a little guide to help you understand what's there. There are a ton of macros, first of all. The guide will walk you through how to install everything. But there's different categories of macros. You'll see that there's a data setup thing, which will help configure your data. There's a stretching section, and that's because Affinity actually has tools in it for doing astrophotography stacking. You can actually do your stacking in Affinity if you want. I don't. I still use PixInsight and WBPP for that, but it does have tools for doing that. And if you do, then some of these stretching data setup and stretching macros will make sense to you. The 16-bit and 32-bit categories of macros have to do with post-stretching and so on, doing tone manipulation and various sharpening things and denoising things, tone boost. There are a million macros in here, and I will fully confess I have not tried all of them because there's just more than I honestly need. But there are a few in here that make a lot of sense. The difference between the 16-bit and 32-bit macros has to do with the data you're working with. If you import 32-bit TIFF data or you have stacked natively in Affinity, it is 32-bit data, then you use the 32-bit macro set. And if you imported from PixInsight and you had exported TIFFs as 16-bit, you'll use the 16-bit macro set. That's kind of the bottom line on that. So with that, I need to find a way to get that thing out of the way. All right, here we go. I'm now going to launch into actually building a narrowband image in Affinity in real time with zero mistakes. Well, I can't promise that much. All right, so I'm over here in the file menu, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in the stretched data that that I had provided to you. And as you can see, I can create a new project from an image process, and there are various processes already kind of built in. So if you're doing an HDR image, and if you're a landscape photographer, you probably know what that is. You can do that. There's an astrophotography stack process here. That's if you have linear data and you want to Affinity to stack it for you, you'll click that. Since I am going to start this from the nonlinear stretched data, I'm going to click this button, which is stack. And what that's going to do is I can then navigate to my data set, and here's the folder of data that I had provided to you. And I'm going to open the stretched TIFFs in this case, and I'm just going to pull in the 3 narrowband filters for now. There's a reason for that. That's because these are all monochrome. And so they're going to come in and establish this as a monochrome project. And if I try to insert the stars, which are color at this point, it kind of gets confused. So it's best to start with one or the other. And I'm going to start with these 3 and then say, OK. And you'll see over here on the right that the layers are about to populate. There they are. And it created something called a live stack group. I'll be honest, I have no idea what a live stack group is. So I always take these images, I copy them, and I drag them out, and then I delete this live stack group because it sounds ominous. Okay, and now what you see here is I have 3 layers. Those are 3 pixel layers, 3 image layers for hydrogen alpha O3 and S2. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click a macro that I made, which is going to rename those to just clean HAO3 and S2. And it did that. And then the very next thing I'm going to do is, if you look at the channels on this data, it is all grayscale. So this is a grayscale project. It's calling it Gray 16. I don't want grayscale. I want to make this color. So I'm going to convert this project to sRGB. And I click this button. It's one of the default macros that comes with Affinity. And now you can see that each of my channels, I have red, green, and blue. I don't have just a grayscale. I now have an RGB project. So I'm going to demonstrate here with these grayscale images, these blending modes that we were just talking about. Now, the nice thing about Affinity and Photoshop as well is I can turn off individual layers so I can see one at a time. So here's my hydrogen alpha layer. This is my oxygen 3 layer stretched, and this is my S2 layer stretched. And you see that they just overlay each other. Each image stomps the other, and that's because the blending mode right now is set to normal. But if I wanted to blend these together, I can use screen, just like we saw. Let me do all 3 of these. Click all 3. I'm going to change their blending mode to screen. Now what you see is, whoop, there's my HA alone, and if it screens in with O3, it's now in monochrome state, brought in O3, and if I add S2, it's blended that in as well. If you look at this histogram up here, you notice what happens. Every time I blend in something else, this histogram shifts to the right, and that's because screen is one of those lightning blend modes. It blends things together, but it also blends it in such a way that it has a way of making things brighter. That's important. And the reason it is because I now want to blend these in color format. And so I'm going to do that by first creating a couple of adjustment layers on each of these image layers. So down below these layers, you see these different buttons. The 2 that are most important to me and that we're going to work with today is there's adjustment layers here. And if I click that, I have all these cool adjustment layers, white balance, HSL, curves, threshold, things you'll recognize from PixInsight or whatever tool you use. And I also have masks, mask layers. And I can create, whoops, I didn't want to create that. I'm going to undo that one. But if I right click on it, you can see I have different masks available to me that I can add to different images. First thing I'm going to do is there are 2 standard adjustment layers I add to each one of my monochrome images. And this is pretty standard stuff. I do this for every narrowband image. I'm going to add, first of all, recolor, because I need to color this thing. And I just drag that on top. And the way Affinity works is I can make my adjustments local by putting them inside the image. And so these are subparts of that HA image, as you can see. And then the next one I'm going to add is levels, because I want to control the amount of something and take care of some of this shadow region, this dead region here on the left. I'm going to take these 2 layers, I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to add them to O3, and it always adds them above, so I just drag them in. So now O3 has these 2 layers, and I'm going to add them to S2 as well. And so now S2 has them too, but I'm going to keep O3 and S2 off for now. First thing I'm going to do is get the color right. And so I'm going to click this recolor adjustment, and I want HA to be red, so this is actually correct on the hue. I'm going to leave it red. I'm going to leave the saturation alone for now. But what we just saw when I turned on those blending modes to screen, you saw that things get brighter, right? And so I'm going to tame that up front, and I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to turn it down to minus 50%. I'm going to cut the brightness in half. There. So that's now the color that I am going to apply to my HA layer. The coloring is done, at least for now. But since this is non-destructive, I can come back later. And if I want to tweak any of that, I absolutely can. I don't have to undo 20 steps like I would in PixInsight. I can just come in here and tweak it a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is levels adjustment. And what I want to do here is take care of some of this black stuff to the left, see, and bring that in a little bit, not too much. And I can also adjust the white level as well and get the range right. Okay, so I have done that now to my HA, and I'm going to turn it off. Let's turn on O3, and I'm going to do a recolor. Now here, I'm going to go for that, somewhere in that blue. Let's start with something like 210, which is, kind of bluish, more on the blue end of that spectrum between green and blue. And again, I'm going to take the lightness down to -50. Okay. And I'm going to go into the levels adjustment, and I'm going to do the same sort of thing I did there. I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to take the white point over here a little bit, boost it. And you see that because I'm using both green and blue, and there's more blue in it than green, the blue is shifted over a little bit. So I probably have to do something about this too. And you can see the histogram here in the upper right gives me a little bit of a guide as to how much I need to adjust that blue level. Not too much out there. So now blue and green are overlapping correctly. And now I'm going to call that done. And if I bring in the HA, I now have an HOO image at this point, right? It's getting there. I have some HOO in here, and it's starting to look interesting, but I'm going to go back into recolor right now. And the reason is because I'm seeing purple here in the middle. I want less purple, and so I'm going to slide this over a little bit more and make this more in that blue region. There, that's a little better. So the center part of the sole now is more blue, and I can do that again because I'm in layers. I don't have to undo steps. I can just adjust things. All right, next, I'm going to turn off the O3, and I'm going to turn off the HA, and I'm going to go into my S2, and the palette I'm going to use here was immortalized by Linda in NOVAC as Whoozy, which basically means I have an HOO image. If I turn on HA and O3 at this point, I have an HOO image, and I'm going to take my sulfur, I'm going to make it yellow, and I'm going to use that to gild it. It's going to give this little gilding effect, gold plating, if you will, to the overall image. Again, I'm going to take that lightness down to -50 so we don't overdo it. -50. There, I could type it in too, it turns out. Okay, whoops, I didn't turn that on. And you can see there it is. And I'm also going to correct the black points. So since I'm gilding, I'm actually going to try to use just parts of the S2 here, not all of it, right? Which means I'm going to be more aggressive on the black point to ensure I'm really just gilding things and not overwhelming things with this yellow. And so to set the levels on the S2, I am going to turn on the O3 and the HA so that we can kind of get an idea of what I need to do here. And I'm going to kind of, let's take that down. That's a little too much. You can kind of see now that what we're doing is we're gilding. So it's still predominantly, if I turn off the S2, it's still predominantly an HOO image, but now we've added this yellow glow around the fringes here that gives it a little bit of depth, gives it a little bit of interesting highlight in the structure. If I turn that off, some of that detail just kind of gets washed out. It becomes a little more two-dimensional. Turning that on to me gives it sort of that three-dimensional feel. And so somewhere in here is about where I'm going to set this level. And you can see in the histogram in the upper right, red, green, and blue are kind of overlapping each other just about right. And so this is probably not far from what I want to do. So at this point, I have kind of a reasonable baseline for my SHO or really whoozy image. The next thing I'm going to do is, since all of these adjustments were done locally on the layer level, anything I do now is going to be global, meaning it's being applied to everything below it. And so I'm going to put in levels up here. At the global level, that's supposed to be above the S2. There we are. And I want to adjust these levels because some of them don't look quite right. My blue looks a little bit clipped. So let me go back into the O3 and declip the blue a little bit. There we go. Move it over a little more to the right. There, that's a better histogram right there, actually. I probably don't even need this global levels adjustment, at least right now. I have it there. I can use it if I want to, but I haven't done anything with it. And now the next thing I'm going to show you is, this is where I'm going to start making some certain corrections to the image. And the first thing I like to do is dodge and burn. Sounds ominous. So dodging and burning is a thing where you use a brush to brighten and darken parts of the image. So there might be parts I don't like or I want to diminish a little bit. And then there are parts that maybe I want to highlight a little bit more. So while this is where I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at the adjustment brush tool. And if I click that, there's multiple options here. There's an adjustment brush, a tone brush, burn and dodge brush. Turns out I don't use the burn and dodge brush, and the reason is because it will do that directly to the pixel layer in a more destructive way. If I use the tone brush tool, I can do non-destructive dodging and burning. So I'm going to use the tone brush tool, and you see it turned into a brush here, and I'm going to go down here, and there's a little bit of a star halo. I'm going to adjust the size of the brush. You use the right and left bracket keys to do that. There's probably another way to adjust the brush, but right and left bracket keys are, and right now it's set to dodge, meaning it's going to make it brighter. I want to burn, so I need to come over here and change the sense from white to black. That's going to darken. And you can see up here, I have this set, so it's only going to do this 10% at a time. So anything I do now is going to be a mild adjustment to this area here. I'm going to take that bluish glow and I'm going to hit it a couple of times, and it's done that. Now I'm going to do it here as well. There's a little bit of something, and I took care of that. And you can see that when I started clicking, it created this thing called the dodge burn tone layer. It knew exactly what I was intending to do. And so it now has that. I can turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, off, and you can see what happened. Another thing I see here is that this area in here is a little bright. Okay, so I can kind of take this and I can kind of tone that down a little bit. Maybe just brush through here and give that a little more contrast so I can actually see that cool structure there. And maybe there's something else here I want to brighten up. Actually, I don't see anything I want to brighten up or really change further. So I'm going to stop there with the dodge and burn tone layer. But there is another adjustment I can do, and I do want to do, and that is I'm going to use a different one called the adjustment brush tool. I'm going to click this, and when I click that, I can come up here and I can choose exactly what the adjustment is. And in this case, I'm going to use the HSL adjustment. That's hue, saturation, luminance, lightness adjustment. I'm going to use that to kind of fix the tone here in the middle of this thing, meaning the blue region is kind of still too purplish to me. So I'm going to just brush in here, just kind of do this thing to kind of cover that and this. And what you see is it automatically created a mask on this HSL shift adjustment, kind of covering those areas. And now I can kind of come in here and I can shift the HSL one way or the other to get rid of the purple and maybe make it a little bit more of the tone I want. What do you think? Let's go with this. This looks a little bit more like what I want. And yeah, that's a little bit of a nicer blue, but again, I can come back to that because it's non-destructive and I can highlight that in different ways to bring that out. But I was able to do that with this brush and make that happen. So the next thing I'm going to look at is I'm actually going to come in here to the levels. And I think, do I want to brighten that up a little bit? I think I do. Overall, I'm going to come back to the levels. I'm going to brighten that up a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is this is where I am going to start using the JR macros. And so again, I don't know all these macros because there's so many of them. Look, I just opened the 16-bit macros and I can scroll and scroll and scroll, and it's just a phenomenal number of macros. So I have not tried them all, but I can find the few that I know I like. So I'm going to start with one called Enhance. Oops, Depth and Contrast. There it is. And I'm going to click it. Actually, let me click the top layer first because I want it to go at that top layer. Now I'm going to click Enhance Depth and Contrast. And you can see it's pretty strong effect, right? I turn it off, turn it on. That's a little much for me. I don't want that much depth and contrast. So what I'm going to do at this point is I am going to use a layer mask. And contrary to what some people think, this does not require an interpretive dance, it turns out. We can actually do this just by doing the right click. That was for Stephen, by the way, when he watches this on YouTube. And I'm going to click a luminosity range mask, and that mask just got attached to that particular thing. It hasn't done anything yet because I haven't actually created the mask. I can now click preview to see the mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this and I'm going to drag it down to the lower left, and you can see now I have sort of a luminance mask, right? Just like I do in PixInsight, pull out a luminance layer, and all of a sudden I have a mask, right? Okay, so I've created this mask, and now that I've done that, I can turn off the preview and I can see that the effect is much tamer, much nicer, a lot better, right? A little bit more natural. If I want more, I can take this and I can click it up like that and make it go wild. If I want less, I can pull it down and do something like that, right? So maybe something about like that is about a nice balance to me. So by adding the mask, so what happens a lot with these macros, these Ritson macros, is they have a very strong effect, but you have the power to tame that by just introducing the appropriate mask on that layer to make that a lesser effect and to control the effect or localize the effect. The next one I'm going to use is called Masked Contrast Boost, which I find is quite nice. And so that's going to just thinking about it, doing whatever that macro does. There we go. Okay, so that's a pretty intense effect again, but in this case, I can double click it and I can take the contrast slider that is embedded in that tool, that macro, and I'm going to turn it down a little bit, right? 50% is kind of strong to me. 20% is probably a little better. So I'm going to go with the 20% version of that. So I had the control. That's before that tool. This is with the tool. And then there's another one in here that's a lot like another macro that is a lot like if you're familiar with the dark structure enhanced script in PixInsight, this one is a lot like that, which is edge masked contrast. So it kind of goes to the edges and will darken things a little bit. So there it is. If I turn it on and off, you can see it just takes the darker areas and kind of boost them a little bit, just a little bit. It's subtle, so I don't really have to do a whole lot with that, but I can if I want to. Each of these macros is really just doing a set of operations that's kind of embedded in it, and I can go in there and I can tame it, or I can add a mask to it to tame it a little bit further. So at this point, things are looking pretty good. I'm still not quite happy with the purple in the middle. Maybe there's a way to tame that a little bit more. It's pretty good. That's about right. And if I wanted to, I can actually do a color picker and go in here and kind of choose a color and then be even more selective. Something like that. Maybe boost the saturation a little bit. There we go. All right. So at this point, we have a um, pretty reasonable starless soul nebula image. Of course, I can play with this all day, tweak things. I might come in here and just try the recolor a little bit again. Get a global recolor on the blue. It's pretty good. A few points less. And I'm going to hit zoom now at this point because I'm pretty close to wanting to add stars in, but I want to take a look at the noise. And I see noise here when I zoom in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image. First, I have to move my little bar there. Take this image and I'm going to export it as a TIFF. And the reason is I want to do denoising, and I'm going to use Noise Exterminator for that. Turns out you can actually use these tools, the RC Astro tools, directly in Affinity. They have, is it resources? Pixel raster, no. Convert, merge, refine. Well, somewhere in here, you can actually find and use the RC Astro tools because there is a plugin that goes into Affinity and Photoshop. But I actually much prefer the PixInsight version of those tools because I can use a preview window and it's GPU accelerated, so I don't have to sit here 20 minutes watching paint dry. So I'm going to come up here, and there's an export button in Affinity, and I'm going to make a TIFF. And I don't want to export the color. I want to come up here to the top layer. I'm going to export the TIFF as the first 16-bit TIFF RGB. And it's really the whole document, so it's getting the whole thing, not just a single layer. And I am going to click the export button. It's going out as a 16-bit TIFF. I'm going to save that here. I'm as merged.tiff. I'm going to replace the one I did yesterday when I was practicing this. We're going to overwrite it. It's sending that out to the TIFF. Okay. Now I can kind of shrink this a little bit, find my PixInsight. There it is, PixInsight. And I am going to open that TIFF that I just created. I have to find it. DSPR. Where is that soul? There it is. I'm going to bring it in. And I'm going to start Noise Exterminator. And I'm going to put that in a preview window. That's why I like to do this in PixInsight, is because I can do the preview window before actually committing to the thing. Come on, Mr. Preview window. Still spinning its little wheel. There we go. And I'm going to zoom into just a particular area here, a small area, so I can actually see the noise. And I'm going to turn off the noise exterminator. So that's without noise exterminator. That's with, and actually the setting here is pretty good. I don't have to move the slider too much. In fact, I'm not going to, maybe just a slight hair more. There, that's a little better. And now that I've figured out the noise, I'm going to go ahead and drag that on here and let the GPU crunch through the noise on this. And then when we're done, I'm going to export this out and import that back into Affinity. So this will take a minute. While this is going, are there any quick questions?
Sure. Have you tried Graxford T-Noise with this workflow?
For the denoising part of Graxpert?
Yeah.
I haven't. I generally don't use Graxpert because I have, the RC Astro tools, but yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever denoiser works, right? Whatever you're comfortable with, feel free. Go ahead and do that. The main thing is just you're going to want to export that back out from Graxpert as a 16-bit color TIFF, so that you can do what I'm about to do right here. So I'm now going to save this image as the noise exterminated TIFF. Yep, overwrite the one I did yesterday, 16-bit. Say OK. Let it do its thing. It did its thing. And now I'm going to come in here. And what I'm doing at this point now is everything under here has been layers that have been non-destructive. I'm now going to place a new layer. So if I want to add a new pixel layer at this point, placing is the way to do it. From somewhere on the disk, you use the place command. I'm going to use place, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to select the noise exterminated TIFF that we just did, agree to whatever it wants me to agree to, and now I just have to wait. I don't know why I have to wait, but there's something in Affinity that says I need to think about what it is you're asking me to place, and then it's going to give me the option to place it. So you see it's doing a not respond thing. A little wheel is turning, and that's okay. It'll take a moment, but we're going to place that image. And what's going to happen here is when I place this image, it's now going to basically be above everything else and not in a screened in mode. And so that's the image that kind of becomes the baseline. Once I place that, I could actually delete, and I don't want to delete these things because I might go back and replace the merged version, right? But it's going to be the new background. It's the new lowest layer because we're going to put it on top of everything else below it. And again, we could replace it if we want to, but we don't need to. Come on, Affinity. There we go. Place has finally figured it out. And so what I do is I go to this upper left corner, I drag down to the lower right, and you see it just put that in there, right? And that is now the baseline image. And you're wondering, what am I going to do next? Okay, me too. I'm going to rename this just emerge just to make it easy. And then I'm going to duplicate this image and I'm going to put it right on top. And I'm going to call this the blend layer. And the reason I'm calling it that is because that's exactly what I'm going to do. Remember all those blend modes we just saw? We're now looking at how these two can blend together to get maybe an overall better effect. So I'm going to just kind of scroll down these things and see what they do. Darken is not going to do anything because it's the same image. Taking a min of the same pixel. Multiply is kind of interesting if you want to go dark and broody. So some of these darkening things are perhaps a little weird. Screen will go crazy. I could do screen, but then I can change the opacity and maybe, do something like that. And so, that takes it and just kind of puts it a little more in your face. I personally don't like that, so I'm not going to do screening. I'm going to come down here and look at soft light, hard light, and some of these others are actually kind of interesting. Soft light is one that I tend to like quite a bit for blending. So if I turn this off and on, you see it's also a little bit of a contrast enhancer with the background, and I can again adjust how much soft light I want to do. So usually soft light is nice in small doses, somewhere in the 20 to 30% range. I'm going to go ahead and do, 20-ish percent. And you can see it just, takes that background and makes it a little nicer. So with this, I now have a pretty nice image. I'm kind of happy with this to this degree. Now I need stars. We're ready to bring in the stars. And so that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to go into my stretch TIFFs. I'm going to find that color stars file we were just talking about. We're going to place that. And again, Affinity is going to have to go off and wonder why I want to place anything. And it's going to spin its little wheel and it's going to stomp its little feet. And then finally, it's going to give in and give me the opportunity to place the stars. I honestly don't know what it has to think about, but it does think about things whenever you need to place something. That probably has something to do with a full frame camera and, 62 megapixels of data and trying to ingest all of that so we can get it in where we want it to be. There we go. Now it gave me that little icon. Again, I'm going to start in the upper right, go to lower left, or lower right, upper left to lower right. And now the stars are there, but it's overlaid as normal. So I have to change that to screen blending mode for that to blend in the way I wanted to. And for the stars, I'm going to take the same treatment that we did in the earlier things. I'm going to go ahead and I usually do two things to that. I put in a vibrance setting, and so I'm going to drag that into the stars so it affects only the stars. And I'm going to give it levels so that I can adjust the amount of stars I want. So let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit first on the vibrance and saturation, and let's take a sampling of stars here. There we go. We got some good color. I'm going to take this, and usually I'm going to take the vibrance up a little bit on my stars, maybe 30, 40%, saturation up a bit. And that just gives my stars, a little bit more of a glow. If I turn that off and on, off and on, it just makes them pop just that little bit more. So I'm going to do that. And then the next thing is setting the levels on the stars. Do I want this many stars? That's not bad. I mean, it's I could live with it as it is, but the thing that's popular these days is people want their stars down to something like that. I'm not that obscene, but maybe somewhere around here is a nice balance on the stars, something like that. So I'm going to say that's it. Close that. And probably the last thing is there's this weird little raggedy edge. So now what I can do, let me do that, is I can take the crop tool. I'm going to use the original ratio, but I'm going to take care of some of this dead space to the top and right and just bring it in a little bit, tighten it up, and hit apply. And that would be That would be a complete narrowband image in Affinity. So that's pretty much the demo that I wanted to show you all on how to use Affinity with narrowband and with the Ritson macros. And with that, I'll just stop and let you throw darts or ask questions.
I'm kind of curious. So I've noticed, so I was trying to follow along, right? And I've noticed my background is still quite yellow. There was a step you had done on maybe like the sulfur layer,
Mm-hmm.
and I think maybe this is more of like a me not knowing how to use Affinity, because
Mm.
I was switching from like the RGB view or the master view to like the individual levels to try and like darken it up, but my image leans more like yellow gold.
Ah,
Yeah. It looks good though.
yeah. So
So,
so the so for the sulfur, because we mapped that to yellow, we did heavy clipping on the master level
oh yeah.
here to kind of tame it. And really, it's
Yeah.
just how much do you want, right? So we can take that in quite a bit, and that for the whoozy approach, to doing narrowband processing, you're not really using all of the S2 because then it goes kind of crazy, right?
Oh yeah.
And S2 tends to overlay and be similar to HA. And so what you're really trying to do with the whoozy idea is use it as a highlight to kind of augment and gild things. And so, if we did it this way, instead of what I had here, so this is what we had before, was that, right?
Hmm.
That's a little less yellow, right?
Yeah.
So you can definitely play with that and tame it. And if I wanted, because it's all layers, I can now show you that with the stars, right? And so we can choose, do I want this version or do I want that version,
Yeah. I
right?
ended up doing multiply, like a soft multiply,
Yeah,
and it came out pretty well. I'll post it to Discord after.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, the nice thing about the blend modes is you can kind of play with them all day until you get what you want. You can blend something and then, do a merge on it and then blend that with something else,
yeah.
to get a different effect. You could also put, if you wanted to highlight more of the, HA out here in the periphery, of course, I can put a luminosity mask on this at some point
Oh yeah,
to
there is a lot
protect
of HA in the
center.
background.
Yeah, I could boost that by just doing a mask and trying to boost that background.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like a luminance mask will definitely do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you look at the mask layers that are available, so the masks here in Affinity are really quite easy to work with. PixInsight has a masking system, and there's various scripts, like game and whatnot to help you make masks, and then
Mm.
other tricks, to make masks out of color masks and whatnot. These are pretty straightforward, but they're very, very powerful. So there's, the luminosity mask I showed you. There's a hue range mask, which, you can just take a range of color. So that's effectively a color mask, right? And so it
Hmm.
gives you that flexibility as well. And then there's a bandpass mask, which would be similar to in PixInsight wavelet layers. Which
Hmm.
which layers do you want to focus on to make your mask? So a lot of the mask making utilities you find in PixInsight in various ways really kind of get compressed into these three things here, but they're very powerful. And then the catch-all behind all of that is, of course, I can make a mask with a brush, just like I did here on the HSL shift adjustment,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. One thing I always like in these softwares, like, can they increase the icon size?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god. It's not as bad as PixInsight on my monitor, but I
Yeah.
swear I feel like I need binoculars.
Yeah,
It's
it,
how
it, it is it is it is small, and yeah, that's part of the reason, I kind of encourage people to download and play with this ahead of time So you can kind of follow along, hopefully, in the software if you installed it on your machine as I'm doing these things, as opposed to trying to read, what is that, 4-point font, on some of these.
Yeah,
It's really small.
yeah, but yeah, I think like I like when we announced this and then when the data became available, I went through it like a few times because I've been using Affinity to create panoramas
Hmm.
of Milky Way stuff. And I've been like as far as like being able to adjust anything, I've only gotten as far as like stitching it and doing like levels adjustment. I couldn't find where the actual adjustment layer was.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like, new tools, but I think Affinity definitely has a few advan I think the biggest advantage that Affinity has over GIMP is definitely the macros. There
Mhm.
is I think it's like a Pi Astro plugin set for GIMP, but I haven't played
Yeah.
with it enough to determine whether it's like strong. Um, but there is like a little bit of like similarity in like the workflows. And the neat thing with GIMP is I think it can work with 32-bit files, which I don't think Photoshop can do.
Yeah.
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 But this
I
is
mean,
really cool. This is really
Photoshop
cool.
is very similar, right? It's
Yeah.
also layer-based processing. It's very, very powerful. I think there are some macros out there or tools and plugins you can buy for Photoshop for astrophotography, but these Ritson macros are actually quite good. And if you know how to do masks, very controllable too in terms of, how much effect to add, right?
Hmm.
So it makes it, I mean, and it's all totally free. So, Affinity's free, the macros are free. It's a completely free tool set with a lot of the power of Photoshop. And can I do this in PixInsight? Yeah, my history in PixInsight, in fact, almost all of my images on my Astrobin were done 100% in PixInsight. I've only been working with Affinity, um, for this year, really, 2026. And upon, using that in Photoshop, it's like, yeah, the non-destructive aspect of this and being able to turn things on and off or go back and say, yeah, that's still too purple or something and change the
Hmm.
color, or, maybe I want to take the contrast way down on this thing here or something like that. Well, that's really weird. Yeah, maybe I want to take the contrast down or something. Being able to go back and do all of that, or the saturation down, to do all of that without having destroyed or having to undo everything I did before that is very, very powerful. And, as you just saw, yeah, I did, rehearse this because, we didn't want to spend all day here, but we just did all of this within about 1 hour, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna I've got my notes. I'm gonna be trying this on my own SHO stuff later.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the YouTube video will be online here in a few days, and people can go back and watch different parts of this and, zoom into the screen to see the icons perhaps a little bit better.
Yeah. I didn't even notice there was like an export TIFF shortcut on the top right. I went through the file menu to get to that.
Yeah, there's you can do, choose what you want, JPEG, PNGs, and you can do just a layer, right? Just choose the layer, a particular selection or something, or you can tell it to take the whole document and it'll just take everything that's basically on your screen and export that, right?
Hey Jeff, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Getting used to this new mic that I have. Um, One thing I wanted to mention is this is really helpful to me since I'm getting ready to send a rig to DVO
yeah.
a couple of weeks. And it's going to be a mono rig, which is my first.
Mm,
One thing wanted to mention about one of the tools you demonstrated, which is the adjustment brush, is
yep.
that if you just leave that set to normal, um, you get the curves panel that pops up. And I'm more of a curves user.
Mm-hmm.
You can adjust a lot more contrast and highlights and play around with that a little bit more than just the
Yeah.
luminosity. And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm going to go ahead and
Curves is
click that
king.
here. I'm going to click the adjustment brush, so just so everybody can see what the adjustments are, right? So it's all the things that appear in that adjustments, layer panel there on the right. You can choose what you want. I chose HSL for that, but yeah, Terry's absolutely right. It could be curves, contrast, white balance. You can selectively change any one of these things with that brush. So that adjustment brush is very, very powerful. It's doing two things. It's building the mask for you in real time, and then applying that adjustment only to that masked area. So it's an incredibly powerful thing.
another thing I noticed too is when you added stars, you adjusted the size of the stars to the image. If you try to do that in PixInsight with
Yeah.
screen stars, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
Did
doesn't.
you use a screen filter for the stars?
Yeah. So
Okay.
this layer here, it's the
So I did it
screen
right.
screen blending mode. Yep,
Nice.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So that was one of the first things I think I started doing with Affinity, way back earlier this year was exactly that reason you said, which is, man, it's a lot of trial and error to get your stars right in PixInsight. You either take them the way that you stretched them and say, yeah, that's good enough, or you have to make a whole bunch of different star images at different stretches and
Right.
then try blending them all in and then figure out which one you want. Or you can go to the star shrink thing, the Bill Blanchard star shrink thing after you overstretched and try to will it down. But this is in effect one of those Bill Blanchard things. This is one of the techniques he uses in that star shrink. Just by taking the gamma here and sliding it over, you're just taking the midtones and, that's it. Just, pulling down the curve. Same thing.
Yeah. I typically use pixel math to do the star combination,
Hmm.
and I'll do like I'll use GHS, generalized hyperbolic stretch, and then I'll combine it.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And the pixel math you're doing is exactly screen.
Hmm.
It's the same exact math. Any other comments or questions out there?
Yeah, I have a question. Why did you do this in 16-bit and not 32-bit? I mean, when I saw you do the PixInsight exchange, it did seem to allow a 32-bit option.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is, first of all, my camera is 16-bit, so that's all the resolution I actually have, right? And then the second one is going to be file size. If you export it as a 32-bit, it's going to get really enormous.
Hmm. Okay, thanks.
Jeff, one thing I've noticed when you can export a 32-bit TIFF into Affinity, but when you try to go to save it, the only option that you have is 16-bit.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's a way to change that. Will Affinity work in 32-bit if you want it to?
So I think it does work in 32-bit. If you do stacking in Affinity, it stacks it as 32-bit stuff, and it probably saves it in this file as that, right? And in the Affinity file as that. And that's why there are these 32-bit macros. If you have 32-bit images, use the 32-bit version. Otherwise, use the
Okay.
16-bit version. But you're right. Here on the export, the most I can do is 16-bit. All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give everybody one last chance. And if not, I think we can wrap up here pretty quick.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. Good session.
All right. Thanks, y'all. And look for it on YouTube in a few days.
Later.